Campaign of intimidation to keep Peter Lamoni and others wrongly convicted of a mob murder behind bars. Good evening. After 3 decades in prison, Peter Lamoni and Joseph Salvati are enjoying what is left of their lives in freedom. But tonight, News Center 5 has learned that the same FBI, which withheld the evidence that might have proved their innocence, later targeted the Massachusetts Parole Board members who voted to free them. News Center 5's David Boeri has uncovered this story and files this exclusive report.
He's now the mayor of Springfield, but in 1983, Michael Albano was a young member of the state parole board. And before that board came the case of inmate Peter Lamoni, who was serving a life sentence after being convicted, along with Joseph Salvati and others, of a 1965 murder in Chelsea. After reading the files, Albano, who had heeded the call of John Kennedy to enter public service, thought it was an injustice.
I had evidence that led me to believe without any question that they were not guilty.
But when Albano and a majority of the board voted to give Lamoni a hearing and then to advise the governor to show clemency, they faced solid, pointed opposition from law enforcement, including the FBI.
I'm going to just say that the FBI's fingerprints were all over these cases. They were all over these cases.
The youngest and newest member of the board particularly remembers the private visit from FBI agents John Morris and John Conley, who he says told him, if you let this bastard out, you have to let them all out.
Look at every case individually and on its merit. That's how I voted for Lamoni.
Board member Richard Lucio also remembers the pressure from the FBI and other law enforcement to keep Lamoni and others behind bars. And News Center 5 has learned that when Michael Albano and Richard Lucio and others voted to recommend the governor commute Lamoni's sentence, all 5 became targets of a criminal investigation by state police in the Office of Public Investigations.
Myself and my family experienced 6 months of agony and investigation.
Bank records were looked at, travel was looked at, virtually every element of my life was examined.
The sole allegation was that members were voting favorably for so-called organized crime figures, the OC. Allegations were that you and the others were mobbed up.
That's correct. Totally unfounded.
Reached by phone yesterday, board member Kevin P. Burke called the investigators confrontational, accusatory, and intimidating. Albano and Lucio, who were the first Italian Americans ever appointed to the parole board, felt particularly stung by the accusations.
I was aware of the fact that people knew I was the first Italian on the board, and comments like, well, OC now has a friend on the board, which was completely wrong.
There was no information of any wrongdoing other than the votes itself, which was a vote of conscience.
They'd all be cleared after still another investigation, but the damage to them was done, and the governor deferred to those who wanted Lamoni kept behind bars. Only years later would the secret be revealed that the FBI had withheld evidence at trial that pointed to the innocence of Lamoni and others.
We hear the term, and it's often thrown around, about obstruction of justice. Well, the question has to be asked, was justice thwarted in this case? And were civil rights of innocent people in jail violated by the Federal Bureau of Investigation?
We learned during our investigation that the members of the Board of Parole with whom we've spoken have been interviewed now by congressional investigators. And the records from the parole board relating to the case of Peter Lamoni have now been subpoenaed by that congressional committee. And tomorrow night, Natalie, we'll have more details, much more.
You know, David, I should think the average person listening to these reports and all these stories that you have uncovered about possible corruption on the part of the FBI must just be shaking their heads saying, how big is this? How far does this extend?
The next question for this committee is whether the FBI in Boston has been part of an ongoing conspiracy, one to put these people away in the first place, and then to keep them behind bars.
Amazing. Okay, David, good job. Thank you. Greater Boston has begun to say goodbye to the Malden Police. Last night in a News Center 5 exclusive, we reported about new allegations against the Boston office of the FBI, that the FBI targeted members of the state parole board who sought clemency for Peter Lamoni. Lamoni spent 3 decades in prison, wrongly convicted of murder, and today, News Center 5's David Boeri uncovered more allegations of FBI obstruction of justice and talked with Lamoni himself.
I never trusted them anyways because I was in jail for nothing to begin with. How can I trust these people in any avenue they went?
Convicted in 1968 of a murder he said he didn't commit, Peter Lamoni won the support of a clear majority of parole board members in 1983, who recommended the governor show clemency. But after the board members say they voted their consciences, each and every one of them became the subject of a pointed, aggressive criminal investigation.
It was very intimidating. It was very prejudicial. And now I feel what it's like to be in front of a parole board.
The men on both ends of the photo here who voted against Lamoni triggered the investigation by alleging that the other 5 board members were doing favors for organized crime. The State Office of Public Investigation did the work, but Michael Albano claims the fingerprints of the FBI were all over the case.
The FBI was involved. We were told that during the course of the investigation, that the FBI was part of this and that they were very interested in the outcome.
At the time of the board's hearing, Albano says FBI agents John Conley and John Morris approached him privately and said, if you let this bastard out, you have to let them all out. The number 2 man in the Boston office of the FBI at the time has told News Center 5 the involvement of FBI agents was totally improper, done outside channels, done without his authorization, and constituted conflict of interest and may be obstruction of justice and violation of civil liberties.
Clearly, that is, if not legally violative of some criminal statute, it's morally repugnant.
And all along, the Bureau had evidence of Lamoni's innocence, but withheld it.
They sleep at night, Mr. Conley and Morris. How can you sleep at night knowing? Enrico and Condon.
FBI agents all. Today, the FBI declined to comment on its policies regarding agents lobbying or pressuring state parole board members in private and public. And by the way, although a state judge last year ruled the FBI withheld exculpatory evidence, and Louis Freeh, the director of the FBI himself, told Congress the FBI withheld evidence of Lamoni's and other men's innocence, the Boston office of the FBI has still not acknowledged it withheld evidence of their innocence. Natalie?
David, thank you. The Massachusetts House and Senate find themselves at odds over the clean elections law approved overwhelmingly by voters 2 years ago. The House does not want further public money added to the election coffers, but the Senate is willing to make that addition. In an effort to keep the new elections law alive, Senate President Tom Birmingham today proposed earmarking $20 million for it in the new budget. Even if the Senate approves the money, of course, both chambers must still agree before the bill would go to the governor's desk. His attorneys call it fraud upon the court, and with that, Timothy McVeigh says now he will try to have his execution delayed again. This has been the site of several crashes, one of them deadly recently. A dangerous highway exit near the Tobin Bridge. Should it be closed down? Will it? And it was bound to happen in this age of self-service. The self-serve checkout is coming to some local super